and you're author of a theory. Here's what she's saying. First of all, white people are dying out. Into the next century, everybody on Earth may be of color. And we're scared about it. Already we're a minority. Did you know that? I'll guess 25% of us are white, maybe less than that. And that's the reason we're racist. We're not only afraid of dying out, but we're also jealous because we have no color. You're laughing. How come we spend so much time in the sun trying to get brown? Can't make a baby of color. And that's the reason for racism and lynching. And if how do you explain? Do you believe we're racist? No, we're not racist. Yes, we are racist. What is this, an accident that all the cities are becoming blacker and blacker while the outer reaches of major metropolitan whiter and whiter? That's an accident? Oh, come on. When you get on an elevator and you're the only white person on the elevator, how do you feel? What'd she say? What'd she say? Frightened, she said? Oh, she's scared of elevators. Okay, here we go. Frances Cress Welsing, M.D. You are a Washington, D.C.-based psychiatrist, and you're author of the Cress, your middle name, we should say, theory of color confrontation and racism. You call racism white supremacy. To be sure, a provocative and controversial theory on skin color and oppression. Well, I'm ready. So is this mostly but not exclusively white audience. Let them have it, Doctor. Boy, oh boy, do you need an escort to get out of your speeches?
No, now, let me just give you a little background. This paper was written approximately in 1969 and presented in 1970. It was written for a group of black psychiatrists who were looking at racism.
Yeah.
It was also written because as a psychiatrist and working in a hospital trying to treat black people and white people, but recognizing that the majority of the problems that black patients had in a psychiatric hospital, when you took a history, you would run smack into racism. So I knew I had to understand racism to help solve the mental health problems of black people. Okay. So out of my brain computer, putting in the question, why do we see this behavior? Why have we seen it for hundreds of years? So I thought about these two things, basically two facts, that even though the white population says that people of color are minorities, that it is the white population that is the minority on the planet.
That's the reality you're saying.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
That in spite of the fact that black people, non-white people have heard over and over again, you're genetically inferior because you are non-white. That in reality, white skin is a genetic recessive status, not as said by Frances Welsing. You see, meaning that if
you and I were to have a baby, the baby would have color, and you make the contribution and I don't.
That white plus colored. Well, wait a minute. It's not Frances Welsing that is concerned about the disappearance of white. Ben Wattenberg just wrote a book, The Birth Dearth. There have been multiple articles in the newspaper talking about the decline of Western populations.
Yeah, here's the Washington Post, just to name one. We are a depopulation bomb, the withering of the Western world. Here, incidentally, this was the percentage of the West's population in 1900, the turn of this century, about 30%. This is where we'll be less than 10% in the year 2075. Here's where we are about today, 15. So we're not having babies.
So whites are not having babies, and there is the concern about white genetic annihilation. In other words, I look at, this is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday holiday, and people will say, well, here's a man who talked about love. Yeah. Why was he killed? And I say that the deeper logic is, what if all black and white people and non-white people and white people love? What would happen to white people? white would disappear. You see, just mix all of the people on the planet up
In other words,
together.
if race didn't matter, or if color didn't matter, it follows with the jet planes.
No, I'm not saying if it didn't matter. I'm saying that indeed if there was a mingling of all of the people, because
That's what I'm saying.
okay, fine.
Absence of prejudice.
The ability, no, wait, don't confuse what I'm saying. I'm saying that if we mixed all of the people presently on the planet, stirred them up,
The white freckle-faced people would be gone.
Genetic recessive status would disappear. And that if I did a survey and everybody didn't have to, you know, face anybody, if I said how many people who are white want their children to be white, want their grandchildren to be white, want their great-grandchildren to be white, want their great-great-grandchildren to be white. And I've gone all over the country in England and asked this question. Yeah. Everybody wants the children and the generations to remain white. Yes. If you do, then you have to do something to make sure that that happens. And I say that what the thing is that is done, and particularly in relationship to black non-whites, because we have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation.
Because you're the blackest.
Because we, right.
The most color.
Right. We have this ability to produce melanin pigment. We have more of it than anybody else. And so the most pressure is on black people. As a matter of fact, the black people learn, all non-white people over the world learn. If you're black, stay back. If you're yellow, you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, mellow, white, right. I can go to England and the people can just say the same thing. Doesn't matter whether if you go to the Philippines, because there has been a confrontation of brown with white. Everybody knows the more pigment you have, the more pressure that is on you. Yeah. But they didn't understand why. I say the why is for the purpose of white genetic survival.
All right. And you're saying that blacks have no similar hidden, subconscious anxiety about their blackness being undermined by the presence of white?
We don't have that fear. And I think that this is something that is not understood. You see, in other words, if I don't worry about, as a matter of fact, under white supremacy, the non-white people try to get lighter. You see, because the less pigment you have, the less threat you are to white, and so the greater opportunity that you have.
Yeah. The mass inability of whites to live and attend school in the presence of non-whites, manifested by the patterns of black and white housing and education throughout this country, and indeed throughout the world, is seen, according to your thesis, in terms of the color confrontation thesis, as the apparent total psychological discomfort experienced by whites in situations in which they must daily face their color inadequacy when they confront their neighbors of color. You go on.
I predicted. Look, I wrote that in 1970. I said you cannot have integrated housing. You cannot have integrated schools.
You still believe that?
Well, I mean, the evidence. I always look at the evidence. If Mr. Black and Mr. White live next door to each other, they have the same job, the same income, the same car, the same furniture. Yeah. They both walk out of the house in the morning. Good morning, Mr. Black. Good morning, Mr. White. Yeah. But Mr. White is still looking, but you've got something that I don't have.
You're saying he's saying that subconsciously.
Saying, right.
Now, wait a minute. All right, we'll give you a chance in just a moment.
Wait a minute.
Now, wait a minute.
Let's look at
They're nice people. You're really going to like them, I promise you. You know, once in a while, you know, a couple of them stop before they come up here, and you got to keep an eye on them.
Let's look at this.
You know, go ahead, look at it.
Very fortunately.
Now, let me just understand this. See, the reason they're groaning is, you know, that's an awful bad rap to take. Let me just arrogantly try and reword what I think you're saying. Now, don't get crazy. Let me see.
Please,
Mr. White is looking at Mr. Black, and he's not consciously saying, don't you dare.
Not consciously.
So it is under here.
Not consciously. I mean, we could go on for 3 hours. Not consciously.
All right. All right.
Okay. I am saying that this behavior is at the subconscious level, and there's a lot of evidence. For example, just on Saturday, the New York Times had an article talking about the percentage of people who want a tan. 66%. I have the article if anybody wants to